Welcome back to the Watches and Style channel, guys. This is your host, Young Brando, live from Los Angeles. We are continuing with another important installment tonight of our new segment, References and Auction Results. As you know, this is a segment where I focus on a single design, on one particular type of watch, a specific iconic timepiece, talk a little bit about its history, what it brought to the table in terms of design, what it brought into the world of horology, and then we basically track some of the ways in which this piece has moved, performed, or trended on the secondary market. Often we do this by referring back to the auction circuit and see how some of the choice models have performed on recent auctions, especially in the last 5 years or so. Otherwise, we also tap into the secondary market, bring in kind of the Chrono 24 and try to learn a little bit from how the prices are trending. Today, perhaps we have one of the most iconic timepieces. We are going to talk about the Reverso, the Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso, which in many ways brings together so many things, ties together so many stories within its conception and within its history that it's almost impossible to tackle it in a single episode. So at the very beginning, I will ask you to feel free to direct me if you would like with any specific questions that you can share with Super Chats. Otherwise, this episode is sponsored by I Love Maldives. This is this entire series, in fact, so far has been under his guidance and patronage, and I really, really appreciate that. But yes, at the end of the day, once the live stream ends, if you have any more questions, if you have any more themes that you would like me to explore, any other genres of the Reverso wristwatch that you would like me to consider, feel free to drop them in the comments. If you have any recommendations for future segments, once again, you should absolutely feel free to write those in the comments as well. Of course, as always, feel free to drop your thoughts, your comments, your suggestions, your questions to the chat, but I will remain focused on the topic tonight, and I can only answer questions that are relevant to it. We'll begin by talking about the history and conception of the design. We will then explore 3 distinct categories, 3 different large groupings for the Reverso. We'll talk about ultra-thin Reversos. We're going to talk about what I like calling the Big Six, those famous 90s models that breathe new life into the design. And we are going to talk about some other complicated Reverso watches as our third grouping. So let me start with talking a little bit about the history of this design. Hi, Sam. Nice to see you, man. The Reverso is a watch that is perhaps the first sports watch designed for the purpose. It is, in so many ways, the ancestor to the whole genre of the elegant sports watch, or the sports chic piece, or the luxury sports watch. It's also a watch that brings together so many different moments and movements into the world of horology. But let's start at the very beginning. The history of the Reverso goes back to the 30s, specifically to this trip that a close associate of the brand by the name of César de Tré went to the subcontinent, went to India, where he was spending a lot of time with the British officers deployed there in the Raj. And his friends were involved in the game of kings, as they sometimes call it. They loved playing the game of polo. And knowing his interest in design, knowing his investment in horology, knowing his unique approach also to design, they asked César de Tré for a timepiece they could actually wear while they were playing the game with some abandon. Because before that, they usually didn't bother taking off their dress watches, their more elegant pieces, when they embarked on the game. And oftentimes, the watches would be completely shattered and mangled. But most importantly, almost all the time, the crystals of the watches would break. And again, of course, there are instances where you can break even the sapphire crystal of your modern watch, or the acrylic plastic crystals of an earlier era. But at the time, watch crystals were made of tempered glass, so they were even more prone to cracking, breaking, or completely shattering. And on his return to the old continent, on his return to Switzerland, César de Tré sat down with his friend and associate, Jaeger-LeCoultre, for a brainstorming session, let's put it like this, to address this problem. What could we do to have a protective mechanism for a wristwatch that people can use when they're engaged in activity, in sports activity, and more specifically in a game of polo, where the widely swinging mallets might actually completely take away the watch, but certainly would present enough of a shock to break the glass crystal. They had a couple of ideas. To my understanding, according to my research, some of the initial ideas were centered for a protective grill, right? In the same way that we were talking about perhaps yesterday, in the same design that is associated with Jarajanta's original Pasha design, where you have that usually very ornate grill on top of the watch's crystal. But soon enough, they decided that they want to go with something that is more inventive, that is more innovative, and they basically recruited René Alfred Chauveau for the swiveling case design that we today know and adore. I'm wearing, by the way, as it happens, my own Reverso, which is a grand date. So just to demonstrate that mechanism for you, of course, this is a 21st century watch produced between year 2002 and 2012. So it has an exhibition case back, but of course, the original design had a solid metal case back, which will become an important part of the story. So they came up with this unique design that allowed the watch to turn around itself, that allowed the case to swivel and close so that the glass crystal on the other side of the watch would be nicely protected. And yeah, I also like wearing this watch for the most part on these so-called summer style canvas straps that follow that Casa Fagliano made polo straps, which we will once again return as part of our stories, which is to say that I still think of the Reverso as a sporty watch, as a watch that conveys, of course, elegance in spades, but as a watch that can also have, at least on a symbolic level, this dynamism that one associates with sports activity. And again, that has been at the core of its origin as one of the first watches that was designed with a specific sports in mind. Here are a few examples of the early pieces from the 30s. The design of the Reverso is associated with Art-Deco or Art-Deco, which is short for the French art décoratif. It's a movement that has its origins in the first half of the 20th century, especially prominent in the 20s and 30s, and oftentimes the real beginning and international propagation of the style of the movement is associated with the Exposition internationale des arts décoratifs et industriels modernes, which is the international exhibition of modern decorative and industrial arts that was held in Paris in 1925. And one of the, of course, this is a movement that was expressed in works of art, in monuments, of course, in buildings, so in architecture more broadly, but also in the making of functional objects, even household items. right? And the idea was that one would focus on lines, geometric shapes, streamlined designs, and find ways of embellishing them, find ways of decorating them, find ways of ennobling them with a certain aesthetic, or shall we say, artistic flourish. And this is something you can most certainly see in the Reverso design, where form and function come together quite neatly, right? It is a uniquely shaped watch. It is a so-called design watch. It is a so-called form watch, but that form itself has its origin for this protective watch, for this sporting watch that they wanted to design for the game of polo. And you can see how that's the shape of that case and the uniqueness of the design is also reinforced by one, of course, a dial that follows the lines of the rectangular case with a proper chemin de fer, a railroad track style, a railroad style track for the minutes, with indices, with the hour markers laid out on that track as so many rays of a sun, which of course is one of the most potent images of the Art Deco movement. And of course, again, that geometric shape is reinforced by the gadroons, by these vertical, by these horizontal lines that frame the dial at 12 o'clock and at 6 o'clock. And you will see that this early example is simply branded Reverso because, in fact, the conception and the production, the making of the Reverso precedes even the proper formation of Jaeger-LeCoultre as a company, right? The Reverso is released in 1931. Edmond Jaeger and Jacques-David Lecoultre merge their establishments properly in 1937. So the early examples of the watch, in fact, simply bear the name, you might even say the brand, Reverso, before it carried the name Jaeger or LeCoultre, or a combination of both. You will see, however, in this later example, you have LeCoultre, again, an Arabic numeral, which is often the preferred, shall we say, expression for hour markers on an Art Deco styled watch. A chocolate brown dial, which in each case, by the way, was quite important. The black dial, the chocolate brown dial. Here's a burgundy red dial, again, from that early period. This is one of the things that made the Reverso so popular, right? Because it was a very elegant watch that had a lot in common in terms of its sleek profile, in terms of its thinness with dress watches. But rather than going for a standard, a predictable silvered dial, which would be kind of the standard mode of procedure when it comes to a dress watch, they went with these sorts of colorful dials, um, lacquered dials, blue, burgundy, brown, and as you can see, black. And the black itself was not as prominent as we would know today on basically every single sport watch, right? Once again, you might have this as a gesture toward an Art-Deco aesthetic or mentality behind the design, where you have something that is quite striking, something that is on the vanguard, something that is fairly new, fairly unique, if not necessarily singular, but also serving a very specific function, which is, of course, legibility, right? A black dial and even sometimes a colorful dial with the traditional handsets, that is the broadsword hands, is actually one of the most legible when it comes to the readability, when it comes to actually telling time on a watch like this, which again was very functional at its conception. Another interesting story is the number of different reversos we see. There are not many in example, there are not many in number, but we see in this early period, in the 30s, examples of the reverso made by other brands. This has two specific reasons. When René Alfred Chauveau actually registered the patent for the original design in Paris, he made Wenga, the case maker, as the sole responsible for making the cases, for producing the cases for the Reverso. And he gave César Lettré the rights to the overall design. He was made the proprietor of the design in the first place. So in fact, Wenga supplied many other brands with those cases, even though they were, again, in extremely limited number. For example, we know that there are about 8 examples of the Patek Philippe Reverso, and that was in fact actually a more personal connection, more of an intimate collaboration, you might say, because Jacques-David Lecoultre was at the time also sitting on the board of Patek Philippe. So he is said to have provided some of these examples, these 8 cases that were given to Patek Philippe to produce, to make their own Reversos, one of which you are seeing right now on your screen, that is one that currently held in the Patek Philippe Museum in Geneva. Beautiful yellow gold piece that is now part of Patek Philippe's own collection. Small seconds at 6 with a sector style subdial, railroad track for the minutes, Arabic numerals at the quarter, and leaf styled hands. And in the old school expression, the inside of the carriage is actually finished with perlage, with circular graining. These days, in contemporary versions that are in production now, that are part of the JLC catalog today, you will often see the Art-Deco sun rays that are engraved inside the carriage. Here is another one which is one of my favorite reversos of all time. This is an example in white gold that was sold by the Lausanne-based dealer Günter, and one that carries only Patek Philippe's long signature at 12 o'clock. Once again, you have a subdial, this time in a square shape, replicating or duplicating the railroad style track that frames the entire dial, and that constitutes the minute track. Broadsword hands with sharp extended tips. A very Patek watch in an important sense, right? Especially with those distinctive obus-shaped or bullet-shaped indices for the hour markers. Beautifully polished. The dial is apparently black, but as it happens beautifully with some of these vintage watches, it has turned almost into this dark shade of navy. Of course, it might be just an optical illusion, but we will go with that. It might be because of the background, because of the stitching they used for the strap. I don't know. Maybe I just want to believe, but this is one of the most stunning pieces that I have seen in this shape, in this design. Here's another Patek Philippe Reverso in yellow gold, this time with Roman numerals at the quarters, seconds on a subdial, baton hands with the polished gold beads making up the rest of the markers. And with the Patek signature on the dial. And here's a very interesting piece indeed. This is actually the first Reverso chronograph. And as it happens, the first Reverso chronograph was not actually produced by JLC, was not actually made by Jaeger-LeCoultre, but by Movado. And this is a piece that they now hold in their museum. And it is from the end of the 1930s, something that was probably meant for production, but never really made it there, and thus remains a one-of-a-kind piece, a pièce unique, as they say in French. A double-sided chronograph that predates the first Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso chronograph by some decades. Movado, of course, had a reputation at that time for their inventive ventures in horology, but this particular undertaking clearly proved to be too costly for them, and the piece was never produced in series. And interestingly, by the way, this I have the quality of the picture here doesn't necessarily do it justice. So let me see. I think I can fish it down from my Instagram right here. This is actually a two-tone piece. This particular picture doesn't allow you to see it properly, but from this one, you can kind of make out that the carriage is actually a different shade of gold compared to the actual case. So it's 18 karat white gold carriage with an 18 karat yellow gold case. And again, it's a watch that's really beyond its time because compared to the original dimensions of the Reverso, this is an oversized watch, slightly more elongated. The first Reverso was 24 millimeters in width and 38 millimeters in length. This is 24 by 44, a very slender and elegant piece. The subsidiary dial for the seconds on the recto face is actually uniquely placed at 12 o'clock, as you can see. Matte silver dial with enamel painted Arabic numerals. And on the flip side, you have an oversized subdial for the continuous running seconds and a 30-minute totalizer up top. Even though you see two notched sliders, this is actually a single button chronograph, a mono pusher, with the lower slider dedicated to start, stop, and reset functions, and the one above actually can lock the chronograph function, so you don't activate it unnecessarily. And anyone who has owned an old school hand-wound chronograph would know that it's a very power hungry complication. So you can drain it out of its juice pretty quickly. So that's a nifty little function there when it comes to the locking notched slider. A very beautiful, beautiful piece. So beautiful, in fact, I would love to see a different take on the chronograph from Jaeger-LeCoultre as well, maybe over the next few years, that innovates on the movement, that plays around with the design a little bit to produce something that is perhaps less sporty and more dressy, but who knows. Here's the link to the Instagram post I did on it about half a year ago. Okay, let's go back to our main narrative. We're talking about the Reverso. Please don't forget to hit the like button. It's very important, as you know, for me, and it genuinely helps push the channel forward. Subscribe if you haven't, because once again, growing the community, expanding the really dynamic and vibrant group of people we have here, whose only reason to come together is to share the passion for and knowledge of wristwatches. Subscribing to the channel is very important. There's always new content, basically on a daily basis. And if you could actually share the link with fellow collectors, with other enthusiasts, that would be much appreciated. Now, Reverso had a very illustrious history in the first couple of decades of its existence. The unique design was most certainly an attraction. The force of the Art-Deco movement as an aesthetic was still quite strong. And the swiveling case, in the manner that I just explained, provided such a unique canvas for personalization, right? I talked about how a lot of people were captivated by the unique colored dials, the lacquered dials. Some also loved the fact that the blank caseback could itself become a canvas for customization, for personalization, for self-expression, right? So here's another avenue, here's another area where the Reverso was, in fact, once again, a pioneer, because it comes easily for us to think of the wristwatch today in the post-quartz era, at a time where basically with the pandemic, especially with the watches having reached this kind of critical mass and entered into the mainstream consciousness, we think of them readily, we think of them easily as vehicles, as conduits of self-expression and creativity. But the Reverso dates back to a time where people mainly thought of their watches as either a tool or a simple accessory that anyone was supposed to wear. It was for timekeeping. Yet the Reverso provided this blank canvas once it's turned around, and that was for many For example, the General MacArthur, as you can see here, with his personal Reverso. These are some more modern pieces. This very unique example that is today in Jaeger-LeCoultre's museum in Le Sentier, an enameled painting of a very beautiful Indian woman. Or a simple engraving here, which depicts a champion racing horse. Oftentimes, again, in that initial period, the Reverso was used the casebacks, I should say, were used to depict the badges and crests of families, logos of clubs, of polo clubs. But at the end of the day, everything is really left to your imagination, that the sky is the limit. And this is a tradition, once again, that Jaeger-LeCoultre is still committed to as, again, one of the oldest manufacturers that is vertically integrated and that can do everything in-house. So you can, to this day, commission particular kinds of Reversos as long as you have a metal caseback. You have at least the option of an engraving that is filled in with enamel, whether it's a signature, a unique design, a family crest, or something as simple as your initials. That can be done, as far as I know, with any case metal. I believe for full enamel micro paintings, they usually require a precious metal watch. So I was told at a certain point. I have heard from others that you can do the same on a stainless steel as well, which shouldn't be impossible technically, but that policy perhaps needs to be double checked. But once again, there are no limits, just the limits of your imagination when it comes to this. And this is, of course, beyond the specific limited editions that they come up with once every so often, that themselves have either unique designs, symbols, or sometimes reproductions of famous paintings, right? They very recently released one of these métiers d'art Reversos that had reproductions of Hokusai's woodblock paintings on the caseback, and again, they're absolutely stunning because they're literally scaled down reproductions of those prints as micro paintings in enamel, as you can see. Two new limited editions each in 10 pieces. Incredible. Of course, with the dial itself executed in engine turning, the dial itself engine turned by hand with a unique design. And this is what I was talking about when it comes to the newer design aesthetic adopted in contemporary examples of the Reverso, which have as a decoration on the inside of the carriage the Art-Deco sun rays rather than the more functional and classic perlage that was used for long decades. Hey Al, Happy New Year to you too. Nice to see you. So as I mentioned, for its first few decades of existence, the Reverso was actually quite popular, but it started falling out of favor after the 1950s, and that has, of course, something to do with changing trends in horology, in the world of wristwatches, but also with the general trends where the Art Deco aesthetic, where the Art Deco movement itself started losing some of its original appeal and pull. So the Reverso, in fact, entered a certain kind of lull and hiatus in its existence up until the 1970s. And an interesting figure enters the frame in 1972. Thank you, St. Peter. Thank you so much. $5. Thank you for the $5. I appreciate you. And that figure is Giorgio Corvo. Giorgio Corvo was, in fact, at the time the proprietor of what we today know as GMT Italy, Great Masters of Time, a famous Italian authorized dealer of many prestige watches today that is led by his grandson, Jacopo. But Giorgio Corvo was at the time the sole distributor of Jaeger-LeCoultre in Italy. And in one of his visits to the manufacturer in Le Sentier in 1972, he basically came across this drawer that was full of Reverso cases. The number that is usually thrown around is about 200 of them. And he basically took them, bought them, and sold them in quick succession in Italy through 2 or 3 dealers, and basically in no time. So that was what lit the flame again of the Reverso. I sometimes say that as much as sometimes people complain and give flack to Italian collectors and Italian dealers, in so many ways, we owe so much of the collector's culture to their ingeniousness, to their resourcefulness, to their dynamism. Italy in the West and Japan in the East were really the two powerhouses of collecting timepieces, where this was not even really a thing in continental Europe or in the Americas, right? The great example is, of course, even in the naming of the quote-unquote watch departments of the prominent auction houses, right? They're called watches and clocks, basically, and most of what they sold were, in fact, pocket watches and grandpa clocks. That's it, right? Selling wristwatches as something that is collectible, as something that needs to be cherished, preserved, and protected, and passed on to the next generation. This is something that really gains its force and becomes globalized in the 70s and onward. And that, once again, is something that has a pertinence, that has a certain weight when it comes to the Reverso story as well, where it was the Italian distributor who actually lit the initial spark, made the opening gambit in this comeback that was experienced by the model. So nowadays we take it for granted that the Reverso is an iconic watch, that it is the icon of Jaeger-LeCoultre, but that is actually an history that was open to so much arbitrariness, and that was not at all decided in advance, which brings us then to the 1990s, when the LMH, Les Manufactures Horlogères, which was the watch division basically of Mannesmann, tasked Günter Blümlein with the mission of reinvigorating the brand, with the mission of reviving JLC. He had that vision of homing in onto the watch with the rectangular case and a swiveling mechanism to carve out a distinctive identity for the brand. And I think that's really important, right? Because of course, more recently, for example, when Jaeger-LeCoultre introduced its new division, its new initiative of the collectibles, where they in fact present selections, curations from their own archival designs, and basically sell pre-owned and rehold examples of these watches. They still included the Reverso in the group, but that initiative in and of itself, the collectibles in and of itself, was in fact a way to perhaps open up the space within the autobiography of the brands, within the story of the brands, within the history of the brands, to all these other rich, compelling designs and other examples of watchmaking beyond the Reverso. And make no mistake, right? Reverso, once again, is something that came together both as a piece of unique design, as we talked about it in terms of its conception, but also something that was really functional and something that embodied the most important watchmaking expertise of the LeCoultre manufacturer as well. The one trivia that jumps into my mind right now about the initial conception is in 1931, when the development of the case basically preceded the making of the original movement. And again, as you know, that is JLC's expertise. They are the watchmaker's watchmaker. They are the ones who supply calibers, who produce movements, or who have historically at least produced movements for other prominent watchmakers. In this case, they had to source the movements from Tavannes, because they were, in fact, once again, thinking perhaps too ambitiously about a movement that would be form-fitting, that would be shaped for the watch, right? They were perhaps, once again, already wedded to that idea of an Art-Deco aesthetic where form and function come together. That took a couple of years for them to develop. And again, it was finally, the Reverso was finally a design that's fleshed out, that's embodied, that's brought together all these different aspects of the expertise that Jaeger-LeCoultre was really concentrating at that time. So it wasn't a surprise where Blümlein turned into this model when he wanted to revive the brand in the 1990s, where he wanted to actually give Jaeger-LeCoultre a very distinctive identity, a very singular image. And it was much more for him than an aesthetic vision to revive a quaint icon of the Art Deco era. Armed with the immediate experience of reorganizing IWC and his collaboration with Kurt Klaus in developing an in-house perpetual calendar module, and together with the JLC CEO Henri-Jean Belmont and French designer Yannick Deleshkiewicz, Günter Blümlein reimagined the Reverso for the 21st century, where the rectangular case became the canvas for the watchmaker's watchmaker to illustrate the highest levels of watchmaking to come out of Valais-du-Choux. So in 1991, they produced what you are looking at right now on your screen. Hey guys, nice to see you. Nice to see you all. The 60e, which was the first in line of 6 limited editions that all employed the new modernized, contemporary grand tie case. (26 by 42 millimeters, more or less. That they were all made in 5 and 18 carats pink gold, and each limited edition was produced in 500 examples and presented in these exquisite burlwood cases. And we're gonna take a look at that now. But this is basically the first quote unquote complicated Reverso, the 60th anniversary edition, with this additional pink gold hand deployed under the hand stack, under the hand for hour and minutes, pointer dates at the center of the dial, and with a power reserve that is situated at 11 o'clock. This is the case back for the 60th anniversary edition. In 1993, the first tourbillon in the Reverso case. Here is how it looks on the exhibition case back. What I like most about every example of the so-called Big Six of these 90s limited editions is how simple the most complicated pieces look on the face of the watch. The so-called recto side is very simple. Usually it's just time telling, just hours, minutes, and seconds in this case. And then on the flip side, you have a beautiful movement that is itself executed in precious metal, right here in 14 karat pink gold. And you have that tourbillon that once again has become a signature now, slightly shifted lower with the gadroons making way for it, and in fact now emphasizing and framing the tourbillon cage. And there's also a power reserve that itself has a backdrop that is engine turned by hand. The dials are again hand guilloché, engine turned by hand, and those rose lathes from a bygone era that are beautifully preserved for the present remain the pride and joy of the manufacturer of Le Sentier today. If you ever give them a visit, I'm sure they will be proud to show you some examples of those machines. And I think probably after what the Swatch Group has accumulated, the Jaeger-LeCoultre manufacturer must have probably some of the largest numbers of those Rose engines that are to be found anywhere in the world, at least in watchmaking. And here we are in 1994, the Répétition Minute, the minute repeater. Again, the integration of the slide is absolutely discreet. You might not even notice it. The dial is very simple, only with the governor situated at 5 o'clock and framed by the plaque that spells out the complication. Once again, in 5N 18 karat pink gold, produced in 500 examples. 1996 gave us the chronograph retrograde, once more within the confines of the Günter case, 26 by 42. Just hour, minutes, and date at 6 o'clock, and a discrete indicator in the style of a mailbox flag situated at 5 o'clock to let the wearer know of the activity of the chronograph. So when you engage the chronograph with this pusher at 2 o'clock, that flag falls down to expose the French word for running, marche, whereas it now says arrêt, which is to say that the chronograph is currently stopped. The beautiful JL logo applied in pink gold also at 12. The heat blued sword hands, providing both a nice aesthetic touch, but also beautiful legibility against the silvered dial. Hand guilloche at the center. Here's how the mechanism looks through the exhibition case back for the 1996 example of the retrograde chronograph. You have the movement itself executed in 14 carats pink gold, which you can see distinctly from the bridges here. And then an oversized subdial for the chronograph seconds, bolted on to those bridges. And in the lower part of the dial, you have a scale for 30 minutes, and the minutes are indicated on that scale by a retrograde hand, which snaps back when that cycle is completed, when 30 minutes elapse. The first in-house chronograph movement of the post-quartz era, so to speak, predating the famous L9511, the movement of the Datograph by Erlanger und Söhne. And once again, from its aesthetic, both in terms of the way the dials are bolted on And from the use also of the precious metal of pink gold specifically for the movements, you can see that there is even a foretelling of the Jean saga here as well. Again, none of this is to one up one brand or another, just to give you a taste of both the design nous and the horological competency that already distinguished Jaeger-LeCoultre as a manufacturer in the 1990s. Right? Once again, we're not talking about normal people here, right? We have Günter Blümlein, who is an absolute legend, of course, for this particular era of watchmaking, with what he has achieved with IWC, with what he has achieved with reviving, of course, Alan Gonzone as a modern high horological maker, and with what he has achieved here in collaboration with people like Jean, Belmont, with people like Maximilian Büsser as well, who was the head of products, if I'm not mistaken, for 7 years during the 90s, during this period, with Jaeger-LeCoultre as well. So it's a very, very important story indeed. Here is the Géographique, which is, once again, a very simple and elegant watch on the face of it. Hour and minutes and seconds on the subdial at 6 o'clock. But perhaps you already get an inkling of what might await you on the flip side, what you might expect on the Verso side of the watch. An aperture at 12 o'clock for a night and day indicator. And the Géographique is Jaeger-LeCoultre's take on the world time, basically. It's their execution of a travel time watch, which, as you can see, has a dial where you can set the hour hand independently by the help of the corrector here. But it also allows you to actually cycle through the world cities here by using the pusher, which operates in a very similar way to how a world time function operates, right? You know, you switch from one time zone to another as the hour hand advances here. And the remarkable thing is, of course, this dial has its own day-night indicator and its own GMT minus plus indicator as well, completely coordinated here. This basically tells you what the reference time shows. Right? Even though, again, it's perfectly coordinated on both. Right? So this is 10, I want to say, yeah, it would be 10 a.m. in GMT minus, 10 p.m. in GMT plus, for example. That classic Reverso aesthetic on the face of it, with a silver dial, guilloche center, a different decoration in the second subdial, day-night indicator for the local time. And then on the flip side, you have a black dial with broadsword hands that are inlaid with luminous material. Again, very suggestive for a travel watch. You can see it in the dark, whether that is in the cabin of an aircraft or in your hotel room that is dimly lit. A different design aesthetic with stylized Arabic numerals, a black dial, which itself is wonderfully guilloche decorated as well, with two different patterns for the backdrop as well as the center of the dial. And finally, a model that is introduced at the turn of the millennium, which is the Reverso Quintième Perpétuel, the Reverso Perpetual Calendar. Once again, you have a relatively simplified primary dial for such a complicated watch, the applied JL logo at 12 o'clock. At 2 o'clock, you have an aperture for a day and night indicator, guilloche at the center, an oversized recessed subdial for the seconds, which integrates an overlapping subdial for the indication of the leap year, heat blued hands, which are perfectly legible against a silvered backdrop, and also coordinate beautifully with the background of the day-night indicator as well. And on the flip side, you have an entire other dial, which has a subdial for the month, another subdial for the day of the week, a downward-facing crescent-like scale for the retrograde indication of the dates, which itself encircles the crescent-like opening for the moon phase indicator as well. Again, sword hands for the main dial, heat blued along with the seconds hands, and alpha-styled hands for the calendar dial, where you have indications for the month, day of the week, the moon phase, and a retrograde indication of the dates. Here's another model, another watch that we are going to talk about when we are exploring how certain Reverso models are trending on the secondary markets. This is kind of connoisseur's piece. So the reason I'm saying this is because people, of course, go crazy about the original 1996 chronograph, the 500-piece limited edition with the exhibition case back, with a beautiful movement executed itself in precious metal. Surprisingly, when those pieces come up, they still trade reasonably well priced, which is something that we will come back to, of course, in the second part of this live stream. But the unsung hero, if you actually like the Grand Sport design, is this version of the retrograde chronograph. The Grand Sport is one of those versions of the Reverso that were released successively. The Squadra is the other one that tried to reinterpret the sporty aesthetic, tried to emphasize the sports watch heritage of the Reverso for a new era. Grand Sport is by and large a barrel-shaped or tonneau-shaped case, whereas the Squadra is a square. I personally like the Grand Sport design quite a bit. Sometimes these watches are paired with the 5-row bracelets that are in matching metal with the case. Other times they are mounted on rubber bands, which I think look very attractive as well. I don't know. Sometimes I like these kinds of off-the-wall designs. I like designs that are a little more unexpected, a little less predictable. Your mileage may vary. I respect that, but this is something that I wanted to highlight because it practically has the same movement, except it's not given an exhibition case back, and it is actually produced in brass and rhodium plated, if I'm not mistaken. Otherwise, it's the same column wheel integrated chronograph with a retrograde hand for the 30-minute totalizer. And as you can see, it also happens to have a centrally deployed seconds hand. A different aesthetic, of course, kind of a tapisserie or waffle design at the center with broadsword hands inlaid with luminous material. Very distinct dagger style sun rays, so to speak, for the indices. Arabic numerals at 3 and 9 o'clock. Applied JL logo at 12. A trapezoid shaped opening for the dates at 6 o'clock, and the mailbox flag style indicator for the chronograph at 5 o'clock there. And I think the two-tone design of the chronograph side, of the recto side of the watch, is even more appealing to me, with its cobblestone pattern at the center of both the chronograph seconds dial and the 30-minute scale for the minutes. Here's another example with the black dial that is mounted on a rubber band, just so you see the difference. This is an opaline white and a different dial design too, with the matching stainless steel bracelets. And here you have the stainless steel version with a black dial. It's almost, they are two different watches, but running on the same caliber, certainly. And this is another forgotten complication, so to speak. This is the Reverso memory. On the face of it, again, a very simple watch, a three-hander with heat-blued lozenge-shaped hands for the hour, minutes, and the seconds on the sector-style subdial. And you have, thanks to this pusher, that's at 4 o'clock, a 60 minutes counter. So basically a simplified chronograph where the minute counter actually runs continuously and the pusher serves a flyback function. So when you want to reset that timer, you simply press the pusher and it starts from 0 again, counting up to 60. And of course, you can do that anytime without flipping the case at all. Right? And you can then track the progress or track the passing of the time, check on the elapsed minutes by using the swiveling mechanism. And the other so I had mentioned that I will explore three different groupings: the limited editions, the 6 limited editions from 1991 to 2000. The second grouping was some of the more unusual complications that are expressed differently, that are offered in less limited numbers, but still not sufficiently explored elsewhere, and that can provide some great deals. I would include the duoface, the ultra-thin duoface in this too, and we will return to this. And the ultra-thin models that Reverso introduced starting with the 80th anniversary of the model in 2011. And that's something that we can, that's something that we can see here, right? Look at this original 30s example and what Jaeger-LeCoultre brought back. In 2011. Okay, I don't know what's going on here. I have a small glitch. Let's see if I can fix it here. Okay, let's see. Here's the 30s original, and here's what Jaeger-LeCoultre brought back in 2011. And this is another moment, I think, that has a broader significance, if not necessarily a rippling effect within the industry at large. As you know, the effects of the so-called Great Recession started to be felt in December 2007 very distinctly. So shall we say 2008? And I have remarked on this before, and others have also said that a design like this is basically one product cycle away from the Great Depression. As you guys know, new models, new designs are usually introduced with 3 to 5 years to go, or rather conceived 3 to 5 years ago before they're actually produced, before they are actually released. And I don't think it was a coincidence that the tribute to 1931 started becoming the leitmotif for Jaeger-LeCoultre on the 80th anniversary of the Reverso. It was not only a way of honoring one of the centerpieces of their watchmaking and design legacy, it was not only a way of representing the jewel on their crown, it was also, once again, an ingenious way of tackling the peculiar and particular challenges the horological industry was facing at the time. We have talked about this a couple of times before, especially in a segment that I called How the Industry Responds to Crisis. A lot of times, two moments of crisis, the horological industry responds in ways that are tried and true. Oftentimes, they will drop the more horologically ambitious projects that push the envelope from both a watchmaking and design perspective, and they will return to their archives. They will return to designs, models, and pieces that have been definitive and foundational for the brands, and try to produce reissues, reeditions of them. So in so many ways, just as they led a new appreciation of high horological and complicated watchmaking in the 90s, that brought them into an era where they were making gyro tourbillons in the early 2000s. They have also led the industry in so many ways after the Great Depression by really spearheading this turn to tradition, by putting this sort of intensified focus on their tradition in series that were explicitly titled Tribute to 1931. And as you know, one of the strengths of the manufacturer was the making of ultra-thin movements. Of course, in terms of the self-winding example, that would be the JLC 920, which has powered generations of Royal Oaks, Nautiluses, and Vacheron Constantin 222s, among so many other watches by other prominent watchmakers. But they have also, of course, made even thinner hand-wound movements, an example of which graces and powers these ultra-thin tributes to 1931. This is the standard edition with the broadsword hands and the black dial, branded simply as Reverso, as a throwback to the original 1930s era. Here is the US limited edition, which was produced in 2 runs of 100 examples, 200 pieces in total, paired, as you can see, with cordovan leather straps that were made by the traditional maker of polo boots from Argentina, Casa Fagliano or Fagliano. Black dial, branded simply Reverso, this time paired with syringe-style hands, matching with the distinctly shaped sunray-style markers and a railroad track for the minutes. A limited edition example of the pink gold in ultra thin from 2011. A watch that was worn famously by Jay-Z and personalized with an engraving of the Carnegie Hall to memorialize his residency there. A 2012 example of the ultra-thin tribute to 1931 in white gold with a beautiful silver Grenet dial and heat-blued markers and hands, as well as accents. And a pink gold example that was introduced in 2014 with a chocolate brown dial and seconds on the subdial at 6 o'clock. That's what distinguishes it from the 2011 edition, that it's not a limited production, and that it also has seconds on the subdial. It's not just the dial color. And of course, the chocolate brown of that dial of the 2014 edition was inspired by these early examples that we were looking at the very beginning of our broadcast. Those lacquered dials of the 1930s that introduced some colorful flavor and even vitality into what were the first sports activity watch is properly designed and engineered for a specific activity, for a specific sport, namely the game of polo. And here is the ultra-thin duoface, which is again simply branded Reverso on one side, with a pusher that allows you to move the hour hand independently for your reference time, and a subdial for the indication of night and day with a 24-hour hand. In later iterations of this dual face, dual time expression, that pusher becomes a very discrete slider rather, at the top of the case. St. Peter, for your question, are you talking about the models in the current catalog with the colorful sunburst dials? Or are you talking about the one that I was just showing, like the 2011 in stainless steel? Because I think I would say the difference is very stark. Because again, it's a numbers game, right? I think you can get, depending on the color, I think the burgundy is the one that perhaps has more premium attached to it than the rest, I want to say. Along with the green, I think it's a close competition with the green. Incidentally, I don't think the blue is the most popular color when it comes to this, which is very unpredictable. But again, I think that only testifies to the unique expression that JLC gave to the other colors within this line. I think you can easily get, independent of the color, you can easily get one of these for $6,500, $7,000. If you're hell-bent on getting a particular color and want someone in impeccable condition, barely worn, probably you would go up to 8,000 or so. For the 2011 edition that you're looking at on your screen, the ultra thin, I think you are looking at around $10,000 for the standard ones. For the limited editions, it's really luck of the draw. I mean, it's most people who own those watches by now, of the 200 examples, and I think even initially, always knew what they had. and always knew how limited and how precious those pieces were, the ones with the syringe hands and matching luminous material for the hour markers. So whenever any of these pieces go on the secondary market, they come with an hefty premium. I have seen them in the past for anywhere between $10,000 to $15,000, but then they disappeared completely. And now, if and when they come up for sale, it's usually $20,000 and up. So it's very different price points, as you can see. Frankly, again, if you're hell-bent on a color, I would look into the current line, and you can get a good deal. At worst, say $7,000 for a decent example, if you're not a perfectionist. I like the black dial on these pieces. I would really like to own the limited edition one day, but I can see myself settling for the one with the broadsword hands as well. And I think the ultra thin is just an extremely elegant watch. But as we will talk about it, I think at that point, when you look at how these pieces trend on the secondary market, whether it's the non-limited production or the 200-piece limited edition, you might as well just go with a precious metal version, which oftentimes sells at the same price point or less. So I think that's really an important distinction to make. So that ultra thin duo face, of course, exists in a pink gold version as well, which the manufacturer really likes and takes pride in. The 5N shade of pink gold, or rose gold as it's sometimes called as well. And here's a lovely picture of Günter Blümlein and Henri-Jean Belmont showing off their reversos to each other. I really love these two gentlemen, the late Günter Blümlein and Belmont. Just really another era of elegance. And you can see a little more flair from Belmont. A little more of a Teutonic predisposition from Blümlein. But in each case, the pink gold reversos are beautifully paired with ostrich skin, golden colored straps with contrast stitching, which is a great look, whether you are in a business suit or donning a tweed jacket or simply chilling in a more casual outfit. I will leave you with this picture for a couple of minutes while I take a short break to refresh, to grab a drink. And I will be with you for the second part of our broadcast, where we will look for interesting deals on these three categories of watches. of Reversos. The big six, the 6 limited editions of 500 examples each from 1991 to 2000. The ultra thin in stainless steel, in white gold, in pink gold, and then also a few other complicated pieces, which includes the Grand Sport version of the retrograde chronograph, the Reverso memory, and the dual phase version of the ultra thin. I'll be back with you momentarily. Please hit the like button in the meantime, and if you have any burning questions related to the Reverso, feel free to send them in with a super chat, or perhaps you just want to show your appreciation, in which case you can just send a message saying, good job, and send money now. All right. Honestly, I'm kind of looking forward to the centenary, because as we have been mentioning, JLC has a great tradition since the 60th anniversary of celebrating these important thresholds within Reverso stories, as they call it, in the history of the Reverso. They always have a special model for the decade, and then they have different ways of democratizing them as well, right? The Grand Date, for example, the watch that I have, is basically a simplified version, is basically a democratized version of the 70th, which was a limited edition in platinum with a white gold version of the movements, an additional day-night indicator on the recto face, and also a swan neck regulator for the movement as well, which mine doesn't have either. So I think it would be lovely for something like that to come back in 2031, where they would do something really exciting in a limited edition and in precious metal, of course, that they can somehow also reproduce in a non-limited, serially produced edition for stainless steel. I will return to these, to the so-called Big Six, to track them in the auction circuit towards the end. But I just want to show you again the kind of deal that JLC can provide, even in its most exquisite examples. Monaco Legend Auctions, as you know, is more or less Davide Parmigiani by another name. It's his collaboration with Claude Cohen. His son works with him as well. They put together these auctions now on a pretty regular basis in Monte Carlo. And this was lot 161 for the fall edition of this auction in 2022. I believe this particular lot was sold on October 23rd, 2022, and it included an entire set of all 6 pieces. The pre-auction estimate was set within the range from 90,000 to 180,000 euros. And finally, including both the buyer's premium and the VAT, all 6 of these watches sold for 149,500. The 60e, the tourbillon, the minute repeater, the géographique. Before that, of course, the retrograde chronograph, and finally the perpetual calendar. 1991 for the 60e, 1993 for the tourbillon, 1994 for the minute repeater, 1996 for the chronograph, 1998 for the géographique, and 2000 for the perpetual calendar. Here are all the case backs. Tourbillon, géographique, 60th anniversary, 60e, perpetual calendar, retrograde chronograph, and the minute repeater. Here's an example of those incredible presentation boxes. All 6 of them together. I'm assuming they were bought from the famous Turin-based jewelry house, I believe, Astra, I think Astra is in Turin, Torino. I think, if I'm not mistaken. Incredible. The deal that this person got, my God. Not necessarily matching numbers, mind you. But really, I mean, and look at this. I mean, again, it shows once again how these things sell, right? In August of 2002, the 60th anniversary edition that obviously came out in 1991 had still not sold out, right? For under 25. The chronograph that came out in 1996 was still in 300s. The minute repeater that had come out in 1994 was numbered 213. So still in the first half of that production cycle. The Géographique that came out in 1998 was right at that halfway point as well. The Tourbillon, ever popular, still hadn't sold out from 1994 to 2002. Except the perpetual calendar, which had just come out basically about 2 years ago, had already sold more than 300 examples. So great document of history, this particular set. Incredible. And what an amazing deal, again. For less than 150,000 in euro, you get the entire set. Of course, most people won't be this lucky, but still there's some amazing deals to be found in each and every one of these 6 examples whenever they come into the markets. And it's not often, it's not every day, but if you are patient, you can certainly find many, many compelling deals. I want to start, before we kind of circle our way back to the auction circuit, I want to start with exploring some examples of these unique complications that I talked about, whether it's the reverso memory or the transport version of the retrograde chronograph or the ultra-thin duophase. I want to share with you how incredible some of these deals are. For how functional and how interesting these pieces are. And again, before we go on to the auctions as well, there will be some examples of even those pink gold limited editions that are currently on Chrono 24. So we'll look at those as well. As always, I want to give you value. I want to be practical. I want you to use this platform to not only further your knowledge, but also expand your collection in the most reasonable and frugal way possible, which fits with my own philosophy, of course. So it comes very naturally to me. There we go. Let's start with the memory, and we'll go from that to the retrograde chronograph, and then we'll go back to the auction circuit. This is the Reverso memory in stainless steel with the streamlined, with the simplified flyback quote-unquote chronograph, because the watch, as I explained before, has on the flip side an alternate dial, which is a 60-minute counter and which runs continuously. But you have this pusher for the flyback function that resets the chronograph, which then continues to run. So a 60-minute timer that you can reset at any point in time, housed in a stainless steel case. A more classically sized Reverso, because the case is 23 by 33 millimeters. .23 millimeters wide, 33 millimeters long. And I think the thickness is around 10 millimeters, maybe a little less as well. So quite an interesting piece, again with a kind of complication that you don't find all over the place. Comes with a single fold déployant clasp, old school JLC. clean cognac colored crocodile strap with nice large rectangular scales, listed here by a professional dealer out of Japan, and it has a fixed price of $6,375 in US dollars. This is the JLC Reverso memory with a unique streamlined flyback chronograph function, a 60 minutes counter that runs continuously, but that you can reset with a flyback pusher. A very beautiful, unique piece that uses the Reverso's distinctive design for a discrete but useful complication. This piece exists in different metals too, but I wanted you to see it on the matching bracelet as well, with the 7-row version of the rice grain or beads of rice bracelets. Again, stainless steel on the matching bracelets. Engine turns, center dial, another pattern for the subdial for seconds, lozenge-shaped hands inlaid with luminous material, heat blued against the backdrop of the silvered dial on the recto face. Again, as you can see, it's a pretty thin watch for its functionality, for its complication. And on the back, you have the 60-minute counter, again with a lozenge or diamond-shaped hand, this time lacquered, I'm assuming, in white, and still inlaid with luminous material. With a butterfly style dip clasp for the stainless steel bracelets. This piece is actually listed by a professional dealer from Czechia, or I don't know, Czech Republic. I don't know which name they use at this point. It happens to include the original box and papers, but quite frankly, when they are not pictured, I never trust what the listing says on Chrono24. So I would double check that. I would probably send in a question to make sure, to specify. But again, quite a great deal for right around $7,000 with a fixed price of $7,052 in US dollars. Look at that. Just as we were switching to the Transport retrograde chronograph, another tradition of this show just happened. The watch is already reserved. Someone took my cue and already pounced on it. Just another testament to the great deals served to the community by this channel, by this platform, by yours truly. This is an example of the barrel-shaped case, the transport version of the retrograde chronograph. This is once again the example with the black dial, kind of a waffle pattern at the center, Arabic numerals at 3 and 9 o'clock, applied JL logo, centrally deployed second sand with a beautiful red arrow tip, and you have the lozenge-shaped hands, which I think give a very distinct, sporty character to this version of the watch. For what it's worth, I really like the rubber strap for this watch. It just gives a very cool accent to that four-pronged lug design of this particular case. A matching dépliant clasp as well that comes with the rubber band. And here is the three-tone, actually, gray recto dial with the chronograph seconds and the retrograde scale for the 30-minute totalizer as well. This one practically just sold while I was pulling up the link. So once again, someone grabbed it while I was talking about it. This happens very often on the live streams, and it always puts a smile to my face. And this piece was listed out of Italy for 6,325. I think these are very cool watches and offer what, to my mind, is an incredible deal. Here's an example that's still available. Exact same dial design, but with a two-tone silver expression. And the retrograde chronograph dial on the back. And as you can see, that four-pronged unique lug design for the barrel-shaped transport case also allows for a rather unique integration for the bracelets, right? I wouldn't necessarily, present the Reverso at large as an integrated bracelet watch, even though the straight and streamlined lines of the design actually fits really well to the proprietary straps and to the bracelets when they are provided. But the Grand Sport case, more specifically, with its unique shape and with its distinctive lug design, I think is as close as you can get to an integrated bracelet look with the Reverso, and I really think that is something to be underlined and of course appreciated as well. This particular example of the Grand Sport chronograph is listed on Chrono24 by a private seller out of Italy, was asking for 6,716 US dollars, but there's an option to make an offer. You can suggest your price as well if you would like to negotiate. And again, for a complication that has recently been reintroduced and that is very difficult to get from Jaeger-LeCoultre at this point, whether you're asking for the stainless steel or the pink gold. Last I checked, the stainless steel was still $25,000. But I do want to double check because I don't want to, I don't want to mislead you in any way. But yes, the stainless steel version of the Reverso Tribute chronograph is $25,000. And the pink gold version is $38,800 as well. Again, both of them stunning pieces, beautiful, more in line with the classical expression of the Reverso elegance. And with a skeletonized expression of the movement on the flip side, with the time-telling functions available on both faces of the watch, which is a virtue of the upgraded movements. It's not as pleasing as the original to me. I think the added hands on the chronograph sides just make the watch less legible overall. And I kind of resent them for not using a pink gold movement for the pink gold watch. But it is what it is. It is a sign of the times, so to speak. We have talked about this on so many different occasions. Now you know. And here is another example of the Grand Sport chronograph, this time with an anthracite gray dial rather than the silver gray. Again, on the matching bracelets in stainless steel. Comes with a travel case by Jaeger-LeCoultre. Beautiful, beautiful piece. I actually like the unique flavor of these. Obviously, I would still go with the 1996 limited edition, if you can get one of those 5 pieces, even though you would pay 4-5 times as much as you would for something like this. But this could genuinely scratch that itch, and really literally at a fraction of what you would pay for either the limited edition or one of the tribute chronographs, either in stainless steel or in 5 and 18 karat pink gold. This example of the Grand Sport retrograde chronograph is listed with a fixed price of $6,209 US on Chrono24 by a professional dealer out of Brazil. Now I want to take you to 2013, so to speak, for the Reverso ultra thin duo face, which is the third contemporary complication that we will explore here. That is also incredibly, I want to say, incredibly compelling as a deal. I made a note of this, but I have lost my notes, so I don't remember what the reference number was for this particular piece, but I'll find it momentarily. There we go. This is a great one as well, and you can see just the whole variety of deals that are provided too. the classic ultra thin dual face in the Günter case. Basically around 46 by 27, or maybe 47 by 27 and a half, depending on how you measure it. And the thickness is 9 millimeters. So beautiful functionality, again, in a very sleek, dressy, elegant case. A silvered opaline white dial with blackened hands and fixtures, a railroad track for the minutes, a rectangular subdial for the seconds as well that follows the lines of the case, the pusher at 2 o'clock that allows you to move the hour hand independently for your reference time. And on the reverse side, on the recto side, you have a black dial, luminous, framed by an engine turn decoration, and with an overlapping subdial at 6 o'clock for the 24-hour indication for a day-night indicator, matched with a tang buckle in stainless steel. Again, in the Günter case, and only 9 millimeters thick for the two faces, for two distinct time zones. And this one is listed by a professional dealer out of Japan for the fixed price of $7,624 in US dollars. I think at a certain point, those must be more rare. There was a boutique only edition. There was a limited boutique version of this watch with a blue lacquered dial, which was exquisite. Those come on the market once every so often, but I haven't seen them for the longest time. Those can be interesting to hunt for. There's a pink gold version of it that basically trades for almost 2 times as much. But otherwise offers the same functionality. With this particular example, listed on Chrono24 by a Swedish dealer for right under $15,000. So we have explored in terms of contemporary complications from the 21st century that are more accessible, more democratized in a certain way. We have looked at the ultra-thin version of the duoface, which takes full advantage of the two faces of the Reverso by using it for an execution of dual time, of travel time. We have looked at the Reverso memory, which has a streamlined, simplified flyback chronograph with a continuously running 60-minute counter on the recto side. And we have also looked at the transport version of the retrograde chronograph, which compared to both the original pink gold limited edition and the new tribute chronograph, offers an incredible deal. Oh, thank you, Nick. Thank you. $8. Streamlined is right. Love the minimal look of this Reverso. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry I didn't get to it right when you sent it. St. Peter. Thank you. And Robert, nice to see you. I'll send out the gifts next week. Thank you for your understanding, Robert, as one of your winners of the last giveaway that unfortunately I delayed for too long. We are almost there. So now I also want to continue looking on the secondary markets for some examples of the ultra thin which again more often than not comes up with great examples offering what I think is a very interesting deal. I have seen these for even cheaper, but even at this price point, right under $12,000, I think the ultra thin in white gold is quite a compelling proposition with its original box and papers from the year of release, which was 2012. This is the white gold version of the ultra thin tribute to 1931. With that silver Grenet dial, textured dial. Unfortunately, the pictures here are not as high quality, but if you go back in the broadcast where I show this piece in the earlier presentation, you'll certainly see it. Here it's a little better, and you can also see how all the heat blued elements, including the hour markers, not to mention the sword hands, lay beautifully against that textured and silver background. And this one is right around 12,000, fixed price, listed by a professional dealer out of the United States on Chrono 24. The white gold Reverso ultra thin tribute to 1931 from 2012. Right around the same price point. Also with its box and papers, but with the option to make an offer. There's a piece that is listed out of Germany. The same watch again. The version of the ultra thin tribute to 1931, executed in white gold. You can kind of see the grené, the grained texture on the dial here as well. The tribute to 1931 ultra thin in these editions from 2011, 2012, 2014 are offered in the Gantai case, which is 46 by 27.5, and they are only 7.2 millimeters in thickness. So beautiful, sleek, elegant, and well deserving of the ultra thin designation. One thing that I need to point out, that I should point out, is the Reverso design, even though it is extremely consistent, has been updated over the years, and not only in terms of its size or proportions. For example, these examples from that 80th anniversary decade, so to speak, the first half of the 2010s, are quite flat, which is actually something I like about this design. More recently, the case has been somehow ergonomically updated, revised, whatever you want to say, maybe upgraded, you might even say, with a more angular drop of the lugs of the case. So those newer series of the tribute to 1931, which are also not ultra thin, have cases that are slightly larger and have lugs that are more drooping in a way, more angular, with an angle facing resolutely downwards. Whereas these earlier versions are ultra thin and more flat as they lie on the wrist. One of my absolute favorites of all time is the chocolate brown dial version from 2014. in 5N pink gold. Again, distinguished by the simplified Reverso branding, a square subdial subtly recessed as well at 6 o'clock, with its look that replicates, that echoes with the design of the larger dial. Arabic numeral, single Arabic numeral at 12 o'clock, railroad style track for the minutes, broadsword hands that match the pink gold tones of the case, and a beautiful chocolate brown dial, which fits nicely with that Casafaliano strap. And of course, in each case for these watches, whatever metal the cases are made of, you are provided with a blank canvas on the background, on the flip side, which can be used for customization, for personalization, anything from an engraving filled in with enamel, and even a full blown enamel micro painting as well, depending on how much you're willing to part with in terms of the price and what kind of case material they are working with, which is something I had heard earlier and on which I had some conflicting information, so to speak, right? I've heard in the past that the full enamel micro paintings are only done on precious metal versions of the Reverso, but I've since heard that's not necessarily true. So that's something that you might need to check with the local Reverso boutique or authorized dealer that you have. Now, what about the limited edition pieces from the 90s, the big six, as I explained, as I talked about before? For that, we will have a more specific deep dive into the history a little bit, look at the auction results, both more recently and in terms of the broader sweep, perhaps, looking at some of the early examples that have come up on the auction. And seeing as well how they have been trending more recently. We are going back to these 6 pieces. This particular set of all 6 sold as lot 161 by the Monaco Legends auction, exclusive timepieces on October 23rd in 2022 in Monte Carlo for 149,500 in euro, including the premium and the VAT. I'll be right back. I need to take another quick break, but I won't be long. Please hit the like button if you haven't already. I appreciate you. Okay, we are back. So there are actually two examples of these pieces that are on Chrono 24 now. And I do want to just hold them up as examples. As I mentioned before, you really need to be patient when it comes to these pieces, these limited editions, because insofar as they go on sale on the secondary markets, they can be listed for quite a high price point, quite an interesting premium, so to speak. But if you are willing to take your time, if you are willing to wait for the right deal, I think there's always a chance to get them, through the secondary market, and sometimes in an unexpected corner of the auction circuit, as we have just looked at the full set for less than 150,000 in euro, all 6 watches. Here is the 1993 Tourbillon. That is all. Hey, thank you for your patience, guys. You have to tell me how long I have been muted. Um, the first the first microphone just ran out of juice, basically. But when I came back, was I? Did you hear me at all when I came back? Since I came back from the break? Yes? No? Um, Tell me, Maldives. Have you heard me since I came back? When did you lose me? I had basically started um, with showing you two examples of one of these 6 limited editions on Chrono 24, just to give you an idea of how high these can go, because they are rare, because they are not found in numerous examples on the market, listed at the same time all over the place. So, for example, there's only one tourbillon listed right now on Chrono 24. Full sets, box and papers, for 61,603 US dollars, with the seller remaining open to negotiation. It's a private seller in Singapore. There's also an example of the minute repeater from 1994. That one is 56,475, listed by a professional dealer out of Japan. Again, considering how we saw in that Monaco Legend auction, how the entire set of all 6 watches went for 149,500 in euro, including the premium, including the VAT. So you see how tricky the market is, and how you have to find the right place and the right time, wait for the right opportunity, and try to make sure that you are, in fact, waiting in the right place. Then I went back basically to trace some of the auction results when it comes to the original 60th anniversary edition, 60e, which introduced this valiant effort in reinvigorating Jaeger-LeCoultre as a manufacturer, restoring the legendary Art-Deco design of the Reverso in its rightful place, and also reintroducing complications and high horology to the Le Sentier manufacture. This was the first complicated Reverso introduced on the 60th anniversary of the model in 1991. First time on public auction on November 30th in 2004 in New York by Antiquorum. This example didn't sell. And then the earliest recorded sale of it in a public auction is on October 11th, 2006 in New York by Christie's. It sells for 8,400. And then through the years, it basically remains at around that price point. 8.5 to 10,000, sometimes as high as 15,000, but usually around 12.5, and that remains pretty consistent. And the last three, the most recent three results, kind of give you an idea of how, again, how arbitrary sometimes the spread is when it comes to this piece. Here you have one in its box and papers, sold in Austria. Not the original presentation box, but the original papers, for 17,532 in US dollars. Then you have another example, just a naked watch, sold for 10,141 in March 2023. And then on March 19th, you have an example of it sold by Christie's in Hong Kong for almost $20,000, 19,264. And that's a naked piece as well. The tourbillon. We go to the earliest examples, which actually, unsurprisingly to me, have been quite well in terms of their performance. Here is one sold by Antiquorum in New York City on November 30th in 2004, in an earliest records of an example sold on public auction for $31,050 in US dollars. Christie's sells an example of it in May of 2006 for around the same price, $30,773. And then you have again a trend of these pieces selling for $25,000 to $30,000, more or less, through the years. Sometimes going as high as 35, sometimes coming all the way down to 25. When we go to the most recent three examples, once again, you have another instance of the phenomenon that I tried to describe to you earlier. It really depends what kind of auction, what kind of buyer in the room, and really the prominence of the auction house and the provenance of the watch, finding a certain correlation. December 1st, 2022, Dortoim in Austria. Again, the original presentation box is perhaps not there, but it has papers. So the tourbillon sells for $25,245 in US dollars. On June 14th, Sotheby's sells an example of this tourbillon as a full set, which I think is an important distinction, especially when it comes to this kind of special limited edition. That went for $38,100. And most recently, Sotheby's, once again in the United States, pardon me, on December 11th, 2023, sold an example, once again, ostensibly as a full set, but I don't see anything pictured, so I will leave that to your imagination, so to speak. But that most recent example sold on public auction went for almost $45,000. The hammer price was $44,450. Now, next up, we have the minute repeater in terms of how it's performed in the auction circuits over the years. Once again, we go back to the earliest example sold, which was by Antiquorum on October 12th, 2001 in Geneva for $52,890, seemingly just with the papers. On November 15th, 2002, once again by Antiquorum in Geneva, a naked example of the watch sells for $55,460. 3 years later, an excellent example, ostensibly with box and papers, sells in New York City by Antiquorum on March 22nd in 2005 for $32,200. And again, through the years, you see it trending around $25,000 to $35,000, sometimes selling even in low 20s, but finding its value around $30,000. But ultimately, once again, if we come back to our day, you see how it's really about being in the right place and the right time. Here is Christie's in Geneva that sold a full set on May 8th, 2022 of the minute repeater out of the 500-piece limited edition from 1994. The hammer price was $50,771 in US dollars. On May 25th in 2023, Christie's sold in Hong Kong an example of this piece for 56,297 in US dollars. And finally, Christie's in Hong Kong, as part of the Oak collection, the one-of-a-kind collection, as you guys remember. An example of this watch sold for 42,048 in US dollars. Hey, Gondog, nice to see you, man. Now, we are in year 1996, so we're looking at the chronograph, retrograde, the retrograde chronograph. We'll follow the same principle. We'll first go all the way back in time and see how early examples performed. The earliest one, as it usually happens, is sold by Antiquorum in Geneva. The retrograde chronograph from the limited edition, originally released in 1996, one of the 500 examples, with only papers, sold for 18,855 on October 12th, 2001. Through the years, you see the watch trending around $15,000 to $20,000, with some examples selling for even less, around $11,000. As we get closer to our time, the rate doesn't really change. And the most recent two examples, here a naked watch, sold on March 11th, 2023 in France for 12,810, just to show you again how things differ. Here is one that is with its full set, box and papers, sold by Vempe originally, and sold here on May 13th, 2023 by Antiquorum in Geneva for 20,870. And you see, actually, Philips sells an example of the watch on September 27th for 48,153. Again, night and day. 12,000, of course, it's just a naked watch. 48,000 with box and papers. 21,000, let's say, with box and papers. So patience, restraint, and strategy. Now we are gonna look at the Géographique, which came out for the first time as part of this series in 1992. And we are slowly nearing the end of our broadcast for the day. So if you have any burning questions, if you have any contributions, or if you want to show your support in some way, this is a good time to do that. Let's see. This is one of my favorite references, really. So it will be a shame if we can't find it, but we did. We did. Here is the Reverso Géographique, originally released in 1998 in a limited run of 500 examples. The first recorded instance of its selling on public auction is on May 30th, 2006 by Christie's in Hong Kong. And it hammered at that occasion for 13,923 in US dollars. And once again, over the years, it seems pretty consistent around that level, averaging out at around 12,500, sometimes selling for less, like this example selling for 10,000 in 2009 by Christie's in New York, sometimes selling for more, like this example selling for 16,000 by Christie's in 2008. But let's look at the last three examples. On October 20th, 2015, Christie's sells an example of it in the Emirates for 10,625. Koller sells an example of the Reverso Géographique on December 1st, 2015 for 16,840. As you see, because these are just 500 pieces, they don't always come up on auction all that often either. Sotheby's sells an example of it on May 11th, 2021 in Geneva for 16,614. In New York, Sotheby's sells a full set on June 21st, 2022 for 17,640 US dollars. Right. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Some people have, in fact, blamed that side for the relative lack of success of this particular model. I beg to differ. I think it's a very elegant take. With the Reverso Duaface, to be fair, sometimes they try a little too hard to make the two faces of the watch to be as distinct from each other as possible. So that sometimes can be hit or miss. I think in this case, I'm attracted to it, but these things are incredibly subjective. So this is the latest example of the watch to be sold on public auction. The Reverso Géographique, originally released in 1998 in 500 examples as a full set here by Sotheby's, sold on September 13th, 2022 for 18,900, Sotheby's in New York. Now, the very last example, which is the perpetual calendar. Let me see if I can easily find it with the reference number. I think it's this one. Géographique. Okay. The perpetual calendar kind of closes the chapter on these. Again, there's so many different reversos that I could have talked about. Obviously, the more recent versions of the tribute line, but I usually don't talk about contemporary pieces in this series, in the RAAR series, in references and auction results. It's by definition a backwards looking, a vintage and neo-vintage oriented series. So that's what I did. I also didn't look into some of the more adventurous examples, like the triptych, quadriptych, the three-faced, four-faced examples, the gyrotourbillons, all these different and more daring complications, or more simpler, more run-of-the-mill examples. If you want a future episode oriented towards any one of these pieces, you will have to leave a comment down below, and I'll be more than happy to try to explore that on a future episode. In either case, please leave your comments below. They really do help. They help boost the video, boost the channel in certain ways. Subscribe if you haven't. That helps immensely. Like the video, like the other videos, anything else you can find. This series in and of itself, I think, is great, if I may say so myself, patting myself on the back. I have done an episode on the FPGA tourbillon. I've done a whole segment on different kinds of minute repeaters by Patek Philippe, some of the most iconic references. The vintage Rolex Daytona, especially in its Paul Newman variations, Danny Roth era Breguet, and finally the Reverso. And we are closing the chapter as well. Here, the earliest example, October 12th in 2001, sold by Antiquorum in Geneva for 22,346. In Cuba by Antiquorum again on September 21st in 2004. An example of the watch sells for less than $20,000, $19,550. And then we see that trend again, where the watches sell for around $20,000 to $25,000, but sometimes go for as low as $15,000 as we travel forward in time. Again, there are examples that sell for much more, which once again should serve as a lesson for the rest of us, for those of us who are looking for deals, who are waiting for the right moments, aiming for a target of opportunity. Here are 3 examples sold in 2023. And again, there's one that's sold by Hindman on April 11th, 2023. Full sets, box and papers, for $21,420 for the Reverso Quinzième Perpétuel, the perpetual calendar. Art Curial in France sells an example on January 15th, 2023, a naked example for $27,695, just a watch and nothing else. And then most recently, with box and papers, Antiquorum in Geneva sells an example on May 13th, 2023 for $32,000 in US dollars. All right. We are here. We have arrived. Thank you so much for being here once again. This was, hey, thank you, Barat. Thank you so much for this generous super chat, $9.99. This is the end of our episodes on references and auction results on the legendary Reverso, on Jaeger-LeCoultre's icon with an Art-Deco aesthetic and a canvas that provides a whole panoply of options for complications, for customization, and for personalization. If I missed anything, if you would like to add your comments, give me suggestions for the Reverso and for future segments in the RAAR series, please feel free to leave a comment below. Don't forget to hit the like button on the way out. If you have if you would be so kind to send the link out there, spread the word, share the channel, or share any particular videos that you like with fellow collectors, with other enthusiasts. That would be really the best help you can give me as I'm trying to expand this community that we are building purely around the passion for and knowledge of watches, which we increase and intensify together collectively. And honestly, for a small channel like this that doesn't have sponsors, that doesn't serve as a mouthpiece for anyone, for any institution, that doesn't try to boost or shill for any gray market profiteers, it's really important for the audience to support it in any way you can. Just leaving a comment, just liking the video is a great way to begin. If you can do something else for me, such as sharing the link or contributing in other ways, be it super chats, super stickers, super thanks, channel memberships, or other contributions which are identified in the link below, I would be eternally grateful. Most importantly, I want to thank once again for sponsoring this episode, my great supporter. I love Maldives. Thank you so much, Maldives, and thank you for your patience. Thank you for your understanding with the technical mishaps and difficulties as well. And thank you to everyone who super chatted today. Behrad Nazarian, Nick Butter, St. Peter. Thank you so much to all of you. I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, wear and enjoy your watches. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye and good night.